19-year-old man from the Netherlands asking me for some advice. He was explaining his situation to me, or his dilemma. He just left school, was thinking about entering university, but wasn't sure if that was the right path to take. What was concerning him was that he might enter university, choose a course that he wasn't particularly interested in, and end up getting himself in a load of debt, and then once he left university, have to get a job which he didn't really enjoy to pay off the debt. In the meantime, he had various passions. He listed these as psychology, fast cars, and music, but he had no idea how he was going to parlay that into creating an income from himself. And this comment went on and on. He must have written about 10 paragraphs or so. And it was by about paragraph 8, he asked a question, and there was one sentence which really sort of lit a light bulb in my head. He used the phrase, "How do I create an income without working a boring job?" And I thought, there's a great title for, at the time, a blog post. I was going to answer him with a 1,500-word blog post. Well, I started writing that and realized that that was never going to be enough detail to answer the subjects, and it became a 6,000-word PDF that I was going to give away with my, as a free incentive for my website. Again, that wasn't enough detail, so it then became a 12,000-word mini ebook for Amazon. I was going to sell it for $1 on Amazon. And then again, I realized that I needed more words to answer his question. So I decided to go all out on it, write the full book, and then how to create an income turned into do the work you love. Now, in the process of researching the book, I realized that this guy, Alea, was far from unique. He wasn't an isolated incident. I came across a statistic that 81% of people, or employed people in the US, are uninspired by their work. And I thought to myself, well, that's a hell of a lot of people spending a hell of a lot of time being somewhere they don't want to be, doing things they don't want to do. It's almost like an epidemic. And I'm sure some of you guys perhaps in here tonight can relate in some way. Maybe it's the 2-hour commute you have to make every day. Maybe it's having to answer to a boss or superiors who treat you as if they're treat you like you're beneath them. Yeah. And, or maybe it could be a variety of these different things. You'll have your own idea about what it is you don't like about your particular job and what you want to escape from. But the question remains, what do you want to escape to? And I seek to answer that question in the first part of my book. Now, there are 3 parts to the book, and I'm only going to cover 2 today. The first part is finding your passion. The second part is finding a path to creating an income from your passion. So in answering this question of what are you going to escape to, how are you going to find your passion, one of the unique tools in the book is something I've created called a dream job chart. And basically that requires you to come up with between 5 or 10 ideas for possible business ideas, a cause you might be interested in, or a skill or a hobby that you want to pursue. Come up with 5 or 10 ideas. If you can't come up with 5 or 10, that's fine. 2, 3 or 4 will do. And then you can measure them against 4 different criteria. Now these criteria are an enjoyment rating, a fulfillment rating, a length of time to master rating, and a potential to monetize. So the whole idea is you end up with a score out of 40, which is then going to help you clarify your ideas, maybe weed out some of the ones that aren't going to work, and give you 1 or 2 or maybe 3 passions or potential opportunities to make money from things you enjoy doing. So I'm going to give you guys a quick example. Now this is my example taken from 2002, when just after I'd left university. Although obviously I hadn't created this dream job chart back then. These are my 10 ideas for what I was going to do. And I'll run through the scoring so you guys get a better idea of how it works. Right, first off was become a pro tennis player. And I gave this an enjoyment rating of 10, a fulfillment rating of 8, a length of time to master 2, and a potential to monetize of 1, giving me an overall score of 21 out of 40 for becoming a pro tennis player. Now the reason length of time to master and potential to monetize was so low was because at that stage I probably only spent 1,000 hours playing tennis. And there's various research indicating that you need to spend 10,000 hours or 10 years of practice to become an expert at anything. So I was light years away from ever being able to go pro. And then the opportunities to make money, so few people make a living playing tennis that it was, if ever there was an impossible dream, that was probably it. Next choice was becoming a self-help author, coach or speaker. Now for this I gave it an enjoyment rating of 8, a fulfillment rating of 10, length of time to master 4, and potential to monetize 5, giving it an overall score of 27 out of 40. Now I'm not going to break down every single one on the list, but I will read the remaining potential passions that I'd written down. Next one was actor, then politician, then tennis coach, then hypnotherapist, school teacher, estate agent, and finally scriptwriter for films. Now interestingly, the one I did do first was tennis coach, and I'd scored that a 7 for enjoyment, 8 for fulfillment, 9 for length of time to master, and 8 for potential to monetize. Now the reason I scored those two so high is because, as I said, I'd done 1,000 hours of playing tennis, so I knew I was at a level to coach beginners, and also at the time there was a very quick course you could take, which was sort of the back door into the tennis coaching industry. So I think within 2 months of having this idea to be a tennis coach, I was getting paid to do it. So I hope that example gives you some ideas of how you might then use this to go and score your potential passions. And you'll notice also when I read that to you, I put down some ridiculous things, right? So, pro tennis player, actor, I hadn't even done any acting training or anything, or scriptwriter for films. So these are crazy, but that's fine. This whole thing doesn't work if you put down ideas that don't inspire you. Now, I just left university with a politics degree, so maybe I should have been putting down accountant or working in a corporation, or it would have delighted my parents if I put down lawyer. But these things didn't inspire me, and that's the whole point of this chart. It doesn't matter if you feel ridiculous writing it down. If it's something you're passionate about it, then include it. Okay, so you have your passion, or 1 or 2 ideas. It doesn't just have to be one. As I said, I sort of used tennis coaching first, then I went on to hypnotherapy, and that was my platform to shoot at becoming an author. So you don't just have to pick one, and it doesn't have to be the highest rated thing either. But hopefully maybe you've got 1 or 2 ideas. So what are you going to do next? Well, then you have to choose a path by which you are going to be able to create an income from this passion. Now the journey to doing that might look like a lot of research, might be a lot of practice, it might be building contacts in an industry. It can be all of these things which require a lot of time. So you have to choose one of 3 paths to do this, and you make that choice depending on 4 different criteria. These criteria are your financial commitments, your family commitments, your ability to self-motivate, and also your tolerance for risk. Now by far the riskiest choice is the first one, which is the adventurous path. Now this means that you might quit your job immediately or hand your notice in as soon as possible and begin working full-time on your passion. Now the strength or the benefit of doing this is you get to experience the #1 factor which might make you successful in making a living from your passion, and that is focus. You could potentially work 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours a day on your passion every single day of the week. There's no obstacle to stop you from doing it. The downside is obviously the element of risk, and you have left your job and at least initially you haven't got any money coming in whatsoever. Are you going to be able to handle that psychologically? Is it going to play on your mind? There's also the potential that you might not be able to motivate yourself. Mark Manson, in his best-selling book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, mentions that when he quit his job, he followed the adventurous path at 24, 25, quit his corporate job to become a successful blogger, and said he spent the first 3 months just playing video games. So if you haven't got a deadline hanging over you or a boss breathing down your neck, are you going to be able to do the work? So some people may say this is a naive choice, that it's crazy, it's for dreamers, that you could do this and it's going to lead to financial disaster and ruin. But many people have walked this path and been successful. One example of that is Brad Pitt, the Hollywood actor. He's got a really interesting story. because he was at the state of Missouri studying a journalism degree, and 2 weeks before the end and just 2 credits short of graduating, he left. He upped and left, packed his stuff in his car, drove to Hollywood. He was going to become an actor. And bear in mind, he'd only done a little bit of acting while at university. He was doing a journalism degree. Now, a lot of people would say this is crazy, you know, this is insane. What about security? At least get your degree to fall back on. But what they don't realize is that following the adventurous path gives you a level of dynamism. It sends a message to your subconscious. It says there is no plan B. This has to work. And when you get to that level of certainty or commitment that this has to work, it often helps you unleash all of the potential you actually have. Now, when Brad Pitt got to Hollywood, he spent a few years doing odd jobs. I think he was a limousine driver for strippers. He dressed up in a big chicken costume and promoted a local fried chicken chain. He also had bit parts in sitcoms like, or little soap operas like Dallas. But I only think it took him 5 years till he got his breakthrough role in Thelma and Louise, and then he went on to become one of the most preeminent actors of his generation. So don't think that this is a naive route for dreamers. If it is the right choice for you, then feel that you can go forward boldly and take the adventurous path. Now, of course, you may be a little less risk averse. You may want a less risky approach, and if that's the case, then I'll present you with the option of the Strategist Path. Now, what this requires you to do isn't to quit your job immediately, but it asks you to scale back on the number of hours you work, with the intention that you're then going to be able to free up 20 hours a week to work on your passion. So scaling back the number of hours you work, you could do this in a number of ways. Perhaps that means asking your boss if you could go down to 30 hours a week. Maybe it's leaving your job and taking on a part-time work. Or the Strategist Path works really well for people who have the ability to use their skills in a freelancing basis. Could you quit your job and then get maybe 10, 15 clients, whatever it would take a week, to earn you a livable income so that you can then spend the rest of the time working on your passion? Now, the benefit of doing this is obviously it's a less risky approach. You are under less pressure. It's a bit more enjoyable as well. You get to have a bit more of a life. You make your money, you work on your passion, you can still see your friends and family. It's a more holistic approach to trying to make a living from your passion. The downside to it, and I'm very personally acquainted with the downside to this, is that you feel like you're being pulled in 3 or 4 different directions. I mentioned that I worked as a tennis coach, hypnotherapist, while I was working on my book, and I could find that maybe I would go 2 or 3 days without doing any writing at all, and when I sat down to write, it would take me an hour and a half to just pick up the thread of what I was writing. So do be aware that this is probably not the most efficient way to go about learning all the skills or building the contacts, whatever you've got to do to put yourself in a position to make an income from your passion. But again, people use this route, and one example of somebody who has used it is Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now, he's got an interesting story because his passion, his big dream, was to become a Hollywood actor. The platform he used to shoot at that dream was prize money from bodybuilding competitions, a mail order business, a property rental business, and a construction business. And what this does is it gives you unlimited opportunities to shoot at your major dream. So you may have, sorry, just had a bit of a sore throat this week, and feel it a little. Yeah, so it gives you unlimited opportunities to shoot at your dream. Interestingly enough, he first went on to the, first attempted to break into the movie industry in 1969 with a terrible film called Hercules in New York. It wasn't until 1982's Conan the Barbarian that he eventually did break through and make all of his money from acting. You see, in that 13-year period, he had all of this, he had this platform. He wasn't under any pressure at all to make money from acting because he had all of these things lined up for him, supporting him during the journey. So that's the thing, that's the major strength of walking the Strategist Path. But what if you haven't got any option at all? What if your financial commitments or your family commitments mean that you can't quit your job, you can't even scale back on the amount of hours you're doing? Well, if that's the case, you have to follow the grinder's path. And the grinder's path basically means that you stay in your job, in your present line of work, and try to find 20 hours a week to work on your passion in your free time. Now, if you're going to follow the grinder's path, you have to become a master at time management. I would highly recommend an hour before work, working on your passion, then maybe another hour, you scratch it together from your lunch break, or maybe on your commute, that's 2 hours a day. Then it gives you 10 hours during the week, and then another 10 hours at the weekend. It is very demanding. But the benefit of doing this is that you're under no financial pressure. There's no risk whatsoever. And as a result of that, you can sometimes make quite clear and level-headed decisions. Obviously, the pitfall here is that you are risking the potential for burnout. And in my book, I suggest you don't follow this route for more than a year to 18 months, because if you do, you risk damaging relationships or even your health. But again, lots of people are forced down this path, and people do make a success from walking it. One example, who's not famous this time, you probably haven't heard of him, is a guy called Bo Khan. Now, I heard of him when I was doing my research because I read an article he wrote on Medium, which went viral, and it was about how he got a second degree and 5 developer certifications in just 1 year. Bear in mind, this was while he was working full-time as a school teacher and had a young family to support. So, when you if you read the book, you'll see I outline his schedule there. He created this meticulous schedule for where every hour in the day was accounted for. And if you can stick to that, I know a lot of people say, oh, I'm so busy, I haven't got the time. But when you actually figure out where you spend your time and take the time to write a schedule for yourself, you'd be surprised at how much you can end up creating. Now, his job, as I said, was a teacher. His passion was to become a coder and to teach coding. He wasn't able to do that in 1 year, but he got the necessary degree and qualifications in a year, which then set him up to later move into that full time. So there you have it, 3 paths to creating an income from your passion, and a little bit of advice on how you're going to discover your passion. So in closing, I'd like to say that obviously I've given you a lot of information tonight, and I've said this figure of trying to work 20 hours a week on your passion, and I appreciate that may not be possible for all of you. And if that's the case, I would just suggest to you, try to do something, but try to do something consistently. If you were to just work 30 minutes a day, every single day for a year, that would still help you make a great deal of progress. Let's say, for example, you wanted to be a writer, and you were to write at the very modest pace of 150 words per half hour. After an entire year of doing that, you'd have written 54,600 words, which conveniently is pretty much the length of this book. So that is your first book written in 1 year, just by doing 30 minutes a day on your passion. So my advice to you, what I want you to take from this talk, and if you read and buy the book, is that you've got to do something. I use a quote in the book from Henry David Thoreau. He wrote a book called Walden in the 19th century, but I can't think of a better quote to sum up how we live our lives in the 21st century. It goes, "Most men lead lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave with the song still in them." So what's the quiet desperation? Well, that's part of being one of the 81% of people who do not enjoy their jobs and feel like this is something they have to do, like they haven't got a choice, there aren't any other options, and that's why they're desperate. What's he talking about with the reference to the song at the end, though? Go to the grave with the song still in them. It's not necessarily something musical. It could be a message you need to share with the world, a product you need to create, or just an expression of who you are. But I strongly urge you guys to follow your passion and try to release this song, because there couldn't be anything worse than knowing you do go to the grave feeling like you didn't get a chance to express it. So that pretty much wraps up the talk for tonight. I think we're going to do questions and answers now, and thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for being here. So he's saying, for some of you who can't hear, that what he's asking is, he said his dad said, don't turn your hobby into a job because it can sort of kill the passion in doing it. My response to that, I think it's true to an extent, because let me give you something I didn't mention in the talk, actually perhaps I should have done. When looking for a passion, don't set the bar too high. Don't feel that if you're not bouncing off the walls every day with excitement and inspiration that means it's not your passion. I don't feel like that every day I write. In fact, writing sometimes feels like a bit of a struggle to me. I compare it a bit to long distance running. It hurts while you're doing it, and then you feel great afterwards. So I don't think it's necessary to feel that it's... I would look for stimulation. As long as you're stimulated by it, I'd say that it's a passion. And it's... So you mentioned you did 3D gaming as well. So I would say, yeah, it's going to diminish your enjoyment somewhat, but over the long term, I still think you should probably go for it, because you still... The more... It's funny thing happens, the more you do it, almost the more you get into it. Yes, you won't enjoy it all the time, but it becomes sort of all-consuming, and you do sort of really enjoy even the hard work. It's not so bad. That's my thoughts on that. So my greatest passion was the writing. I enjoy my tennis coaching and my hypnotherapy, but it's always to be a successful author or best-selling author. That's my greatest passion. Greatest fear, I guess.
What was the scariest part of it?
Scary. Okay. Well, there's been lots of scary parts. I guess. I'll try and find one. Actually, probably something relevant now is the older I get, is the thought that I would like to have a family and like to have kids, but I commit so much to this. I kind of understand that I'm running on a fine line of time running out on being able to do that. So that's probably my greatest fear. The other ones are in the past, and I kind of got over them, so I can't remember too well from that. I walked, using the analogies I created, I walked the Strategist Path, so I can't speak from personal experience on that, but I would say do it before work, and then at weekend do it first thing in the morning, so you haven't got the big build-up in your mind or the stress that you might encounter during the day. Yeah. The whole idea is that there's a 4-part process to becoming an expert, and I haven't rehearsed this at all, so I have to remember it off the top of my head. It's about, very much follows that, the research into unconscious competence, conscious competence, etc. But I use slightly different terms, because I feel one of the stages is you have to do practice stage, then practice under pressure, then getting paid on some level. Doesn't mean creating an income. It means, for example, for me, just selling some copies of my first book. At least I'm getting a little bit of money, even if it's not making an income. And then the final stage is, I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's taking the leap and actually going into trying to get paid for it full time. But definitely the first stage is a practice, pressurized practice. So I'll give you an example of pressurized practice. When I was learning to be a hypnotherapist, while we were doing the course, we were encouraged to go and practice on friends, family, or people we didn't know. So there was a bit riding on it, but it wasn't, it wasn't the end of the world if it didn't work out. Oh, no. I mentioned I've written my first book, which I self-published. This is the second book, which is now through Woggins.
This is like the real...
Oh, no, they all are, and I've got more and more. I've realised now that you don't retire off one book, so I've got... Yes, yeah, oh, definitely. It hasn't diminished at all. There are more and more books I want to write. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty much finished writing, but it's I've been blogging for 7 years now, so I've got all of this backlog of work. I'm just going to put it into one book and package it, edit it, and sell that. But the one after that is probably going to be a book called Rise Up, which is about dealing with psychosomatic problems, or a book called Live the 10 out of 10 Life, which is about, I've been journaling since 2003 every single day, and I've created this system for motivating yourself and scoring your days and the whole thing around it, and I want to create a book around that as well. So there's lots of ideas. Yeah, so it's called Success Club. I run that at the end of last Thursday of every month. We got a base in Waterloo, also a place in Clapham. And that's just basically the idea of success, but not conventional term of success. So that whole idea is you may have your ladder, you may be at the top of your ladder, but if it's placed up against the wrong tree or house, then who cares? You know, it's about holistic success. So we look at the different aspects of it. I give talks, and it's sort of more like a workshop as well. All right, thank you.